Hi, I'm Terry Taylor, and I have been studying the ecology of British Columbia for over 50 years. What I want to show you right now is how much ecology and natural history you can actually see in a little urban park. We often think of great big tracts of land as preserving nature, and that of course is the important big picture. But in an urban area, little patches of woodland and natural habitat that are still left are very important in maintaining the ecology of urban areas. And where we are at the present time is a little park in Parksville on the east coast of Vancouver Island called Foster Park. And the local community is very, very protective of this park, and it has a lot of natural features that you wouldn't, a lot of plants that you wouldn't normally think would come in such a small area. It's surrounded by houses and a little piece of woodland that is still left. The local community is very protective of this little park, and this sign here refers to the fact that they've been planting plants that have pollination value. People are recognizing the importance of bees and protecting them. So you see these signs around the park where there's much more environmental awareness now than there used to be several years ago. The Nootka rose. Roses occur in many different species all across the northern hemisphere. This is the common one. In this particular area, it's called the Nootka rose, named for Nootka on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And these are the hips. They're the fruits of roses are called hips. Hips of roses are high in vitamin C, so again, they're important for feeding wildlife. And so right along this area, we have quite a few of these Nootka roses. And in the springtime, the flowers, of course, attract bees. Another shrub that we find in the park is ocean spray. These leaves here are the ocean spray leaves. They look something like little oak leaves. We can see the old seed cases hanging here, and it flowers in midsummer, in July generally, and the flowers come out and are actually flowering for a very short period of time, and then the seeds are produced. Now you notice that the flowers on this, there are an incredible number of little tiny seed cases there, or in the summertime an incredible number of closely packed little whitish flowers. And this sort of flower is generally pollinated by beetles and little flies. So it's not just bees that are important for pollination, it's also a number of other types of insects. And historically, this shrub also had another important use. It has the hardest wood of any shrub that we have, and it used to be used at one time to make arrows, so it's sometimes arrow shafts and sometimes it's called arrowwood, and it was also used as a digging stick because of the hardness of the wood. This is an apple tree. It may not look too much like an apple tree to you, but this is a little native crabapple tree, the Pacific crabapple, and since it's September right now, the apples are ripe. And they're quite important for birds. The flowers attract pollinators, and of course we're having problems with losing bees and pollinating insects. It's becoming more critical all the time. And little areas like this help to protect the pollinators in an urban area. They also help to protect the birds, and birds, of course, are having a more difficult time now, so the flowers attract the bees and the pollinating flies, and the fruits, these little apples, are important for feeding birds over the early winter and the fall. The shrub we're looking at right now with the many leaflets is an elderberry, the red elderberry. It's native in this area, as well as the other things we've been looking at. And the red elderberry is not edible, unlike the other ones that are farther east that are used to make elderberry wine, the blue elderberries. When you're walking through the woods, I imagine sometimes you find you're covered by little tiny spherical burrs. These burrs are produced by a plant, an annual plant called cleavers. There's one of them here crawling over this red huckleberry bush. And when you touch them, they feel sticky. They're not actually sticky. They've got little hooks, tiny hooks, all over the seed cases, and they're designed to be spread by animals, catching animal fur and spread that way. Plants have different methods of getting from place to place since they can't walk like we do. And one of these methods is to take their seeds from place to place by being caught in animal fur. Other plants are eaten by animals. Other plants have little parachutes like dandelions and thistles, etc., and float away in the wind. This is the bull thistle, an introduced weed from Europe, like so many of them. You notice how the seeds have these fluffy, what's called a pappus on them, the hairs that carry it in the wind, so that explains why plants of this nature spread so readily, because they're carried by the wind to new sites. This is the thistle that has little hairs on the leaves. Like other thistles, it's covered with spines all over the surface. This is called salmonberry. It's very closely related to raspberries. As you can see, the leaves look very raspberry-like. There's two different genetic forms of this particular plant. Some of them have orange berries and some have red berries, and there's a difference of only a single gene between one form and the other, sort of like blue eyes and brown eyes. And salmonberry has been crossed with raspberries, and myself and a lot of other people like the taste of this berry. The problem is you can't grow it commercially because the berries are very soft, and by the time you got them very soft and juicy, by the time you got them to market, they would all be going rotten, so you have to collect them in the woods. This shrub here that looks to be a maple tree is not a maple tree. It's related to salmonberries and raspberries. It's called a thimbleberry. Unlike salmonberries and raspberries and blackberries, this one doesn't have any spines. It also has edible berries, very soft hemispheric berries, red in color. And I like them as I wander through the woods, but again, they're too soft to be raised commercially. This is a little native blackberry, not one of the great big invasive ones. This grows wild around here, has very, very sweet berries. It's called the trailing blackberry. You notice that the stem is very, very gray in color. This is a protective waxy layer to slow down evaporation so that it can grow longer under dry conditions. It's called, the coating is referred to as a bloom. It's a waxy coating on the surface of the stems. And this little blackberry was crossed by a horticulturalist in California 100 years or 150 years or so ago, Luther Burbank. He crossed it with raspberries and produced berries such as loganberries. What we have here is a sort of a little mystery shrub. It's called the snowberry because of the color of or lack of color of the berries. And again, it's one of our native shrubs that is fairly common. And the mystery comes about because nobody really knows what eats this berry. Well, we know that it's sometimes eaten by birds and by deer, but generally no, it isn't eaten very much by anything. It's white in color, so why is a berry white? I have a theory. I have not too much evidence to back it up. But this berry is a little bit toxic, so you don't eat it yourself. It stays there right through the winter because it doesn't have a tremendous amount of sugar, so it lasts a long time. It probably takes advantage, for dissemination of its seeds, it probably takes advantage of being spread in the winter time. And why is it white? Well, when does white show up? It shows up at night. So is this a fruit that attracts little rodents at night that then spread the berries and the seeds? Again, that's the mystery of this strange little shrub. Somebody has planted this little tree here. It's not a native tree. It's one of the big sequoias called the big tree. This is the one that grows in the Sierras, and is when it grows up, it becomes the biggest tree in the world. Now that we're not going to last long enough to see it reach that stage, because that takes centuries and centuries, or 1,000 years or so. But this is the characteristic sequoia of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Another shrub that we have all over Vancouver Island is salal. It has these very thick protective leaves. It's an evergreen, belongs to the heather family. And again, it's important for wildlife. Birds eat the berries on it, and you can eat them too. They're nice and sweet, but they're a little bit hairy. Now, you notice how green the leaves are. We're in the shade in this particular spot. Salal has these thick green leaves that have a tremendous amount of chlorophyll in them to collect light in rather shady areas. And the heather family also has some other characteristics that I'd like to mention. That is that they have microscopic fungi growing in the roots that are very good at collecting nutrients. So the members of this family, such as salal, can grow in areas that other plants can't grow in very well, acidic, nutrient-poor sites. As you look across to the distance, you can see that there are houses. These houses are right on the edge of the park, which illustrates that you can protect a goodly amount of diversity, natural diversity, in a park of fairly small size, because we've been looking at these plants all along this trail, and this is how close we are to an urban area. The park has a very great influence on the people who use it in the local community, and there is a little group called the Friends of Foster Park that is very protective of this park and looks after it. And here's their little notice board with some information on the park right here.